This demo will cover creating color wheels across various drawing mediums and how those drawing mediums are going to behave differently. For each color wheel, we will create the color wheel just using our primary colors, so red, yellow, blue. For this assignment, we will be creating color wheels across a variety of mediums. We are doing this because these various mediums behave in different ways. This first one that I'm using is chalk pastel. The binder in chalk pastel is gum arabic, which tends to give the chalk pastel a more dry and kind of lighter value. So dry feel, lighter value. To blend these colors, I'm layering the pastel back and forth and checking on how these various colors feel. Next to each color wheel, I want you to create simple shaded object studies applying some color theory. So in order to create our shades or our shadows, we are going to combine complementary colors. Complementary colors are colors that are directly opposite of one another on the color wheel. So for yellow, that's going to be yellow and purple. For red, that will be red and green. And for blue, that will be blue and orange. For this next color wheel, I'm going to be mixing my colors from both a red, yellow, blue in oil pastel, and I'm also going to try some purples with a blue and a magenta too, because those purples are going to look really different. Now, oil pastel is going to feel a lot thicker as a medium. The oil, which is binding the color together, is going to make the color look much richer, and it's going to go much darker than, say, a chalk pastel, which is dry and looks a lot lighter. So you're going to start to notice that these various drawing mediums behave and look very different, and you can decide what types of mediums you want to use for various projects depending on what effect you want and what kind of aesthetic you like. You can also see I just mixed some purples with the magenta. Those purples go a lot higher chroma than purples mixed with the traditional red, which tends to make more neutral purples. Now I'm also making my shaded objects, combining complementary colors to make my shadows. You can see how much darker these shadows like to go in an oil pastel versus that chalk pastel. Next up, we'll make a color wheel from color pencil. In color pencil, wax is binding the pigment together, which is also going to make color pencil have the potential of looking really rich in color, rich in chroma, and very dark. You just have to layer it, and it has a much harder consistency than either oil pastel or chalk pastel. You have to be careful as you layer because you can't really erase back. I'm going to do a little bit of a blending demo in color pencil as I do a little shaded sphere here. So part of what we're going over in this lesson is applying the use of complementary colors or opposite colors on the color wheel to make shades or shadows for like various objects, and as we're depicting things in 3 dimensions. Now, when it comes to color pencil, a key thing for making your shadows and to have blended areas is to gradually establish layers. So I'm going to be combining together purple and yellow to make my shadow for my yellow object. I want to be cognizant that purple is going to be much stronger than yellow. So I'm thinking, just like when I was mixing these blends within my color wheel, I want to be thinking about the power of the pigment that I'm dealing with and kind of knowing that purple is going to be a lot more powerful than yellow. Now, a thing to think about with color pencils, or a trick, is you have to kind of work in gradual layers, especially if you want things to look at least like somewhat blended. Now, I actually really like that a part of color pencil is that your layers can kind of stand out from each other, and there could be these kind of flickering moments of different colors. But if you do things too hard, then your different mark making sort of strokes can stand out really intensely and maybe in a way that you don't quite want. So you want to layer gradually, and I'm going to start to layer some yellow into here as well. You want to layer gradually, and then you also, as you're putting down layers, it's a good idea to start to change directions. And in doing that, you can also cut down on the intensity of different marks coming through. Whereas if you keep going the same direction every time, you can kind of re-emphasize marks and make them come out really extremely. Another thing with colored pencil, the more that you start to layer this, the richer it's going to go. So you want to build up nice, like interesting layers, and you want to build up some of the richness of the wax. So wax is one of the binders in colored pencil. Sometimes colored pencils have oil as a binder, but most colored pencils are going to have wax as the binder. And wax is going to have kind of a shiny quality. It's going to have some luminosity to it. So it's, you know, that goes with that kind of that shininess. You can get really rich, dark values if you build it up, right? If you are very tentative with the colored pencil, then you're not going to build up that richness. You're not going to build up that wax, and you're not going to get that luminosity, and it might just feel kind of flat and thin. So we want to try to build up these layers gradually, so we can control things, and also to build up the richness. Now, part of what you can see as I'm shading, I'm building up more darkness and more purple along the area of what would be like a core shadow, okay? So that darkest shadow on the form, that's separating the shadow mass area from the light mass. And in a sphere, sometimes it makes this kind of like pizza slice shape. And it's following that shape of the sphere, and it's following that termination of the shadow shape and kind of the border between shadow and light, okay? This purple, I want to just be very gradual building this up so I don't overwhelm the yellow. Now, part of what you can see when we combine complementary colors, when I'm combining this yellow and purple, these opposite colors, it's going to neutralize and darken the color. So you can see that this is becoming a kind of brown, and I want to make sure that that kind of brown, that neutral that I'm creating still feels like it is situated within the yellow family, so that it will make sense for a yellow object shadow. So as we start to get into depicting colorful objects in 3 dimensions across like different still life projects, this is part of how we're going to navigate making those shadows. We're going to identify like what's the color of the object, and then combine that object's color with its opposite color to make our shades or our shadows. Okay, so I'm just going to keep building this up. You can see I'm like really taking my time, building up gradual layers. And big thing with colored pencil, you want to build up nice, like soft layers. I'm not pressing super hard right now. If I do press really hard with the colored pencil, it's going to make a mark. Like I'll make a little example right here. If I'm pressing really hard with that purple, first of all, that purple is really powerful, right? So if I try to now go over this with the yellow, that's definitely still going to come through, and that mark is going to really come through, right? So if I do like marks like that, and I try to blend it out with the yellow, I can adjust the color a bit, right? That yellow is starting to neutralize it, but I'm not going to be able to get rid of those hard marks that I made. So if I don't want those hard marks, I have to put those layers down softly and adjust the direction that I'm making to kind of soften the sense of a hard mark. Okay, so I'm gonna switch back to time-lapse mode. And as always, if you have any questions on this process, just reach out to me. Here are the rest of my color pencil shaded object studies. Now remember, across all mediums, we're combining complementary colors to get our shadows. In this case, it's yellow and purple. For my red object, it's red and green. And for my blue object, I'll be combining blue and orange to achieve my shadows. Just remember to layer those color pencils gradually to achieve the best effects. Last bit of paper. Use this as an experimentation area to just try different things with these mediums. So one thing I'm doing with the oil pastel here is I'm putting down a kind of base layer of one color, this sort of bright lemony yellow. I'm gonna then go over the top in these other colors, these different blues and things. And then I'm going to scrape back and also draw back into this oil pastel with some color pencils and scrape back with a palette knife. And that's going to get back to some of that original yellow layer and have that come through. So you can get these really cool, interesting layered effects that are really fun to experiment with and that you could bring into a more sustained kind of final piece. So let's test this out. First, I'm going to go in with a palette knife. We have a bunch of palette knives in our painting cabinet. So you can see you can scrape through. And I'm going back to that original yellow. I could also come into this and draw into this with a colored pencil. Now, one thing I love about this is that it's both adding the color down of the color pencil, but there's also a little flicker of that yellow because I've kind of scraped back to that as well. So I get these kind of dual colors going on. So these are really fun effects to kind of play with and that you could perhaps bring into another project in the future as we begin working in color. So really fun. You can also just play with more like mixing, like more blending. Now, a lot of what we did with the color wheel is blending with our finger, but with oil pastel, it can also be really nice to just blend with the pastels themselves. You can blend color that way, and then you get a bit more of a mark coming through rather than everything looking extremely blended out. So you can try layering different colors, seeing how different colors interact. You can also try and see how different mediums here interact with each other. So I'm going to put down some oil pastel, and then I'm just going to do some marks in the oil pastel, and I'll even try some different colors here. And now I'm going to try going over the top with a chalk pastel. And I'm going to try blending this out a bit too. So we have two mediums, very different from each other. I got the chalk pastel bound together with a dry gum arabic, making it have a very dry kind of blendable quality to it. The oil pastel has oil as the binder, giving it much more sticky, kind of sticky sort of quality to it. And so when I start going over this oil pastel over this oil pastel and chalk pastel, it now wants to stick to that oil pastel. So we get some really interesting changes in color. So that was originally that yellow color. We could also try scraping back into this too. All right, so you can get some really interesting effects this way. So just use this extra area as a kind of stage to experiment with these different mediums and kind of see what you can do. The last little demo I'll do here is just laying down some chalk pastel, blending it out, and then I am going to erase back into this. So we can erase back into this chalk pastel just like we've done with charcoal in the past. Can do a kind of subtractive drawing method if we want to. So, you know, oil pastel, you can't really erase. You can scrape back, and if I want to really scrape something off, I can to an extent, right? Like I'm scraping off that green. That yellow is staying there though, and that's kind of, you know, how it's gonna be. But with chalk pastel, you can do a lot more like erasure. And then if you want to blend things back again, you can. If you want to add back into it, you can. Just kind of like with charcoal. Has a very similar feel to charcoal. Okay, so you can get these kind of luminous erased lights. I always kind of love the look of that. And then again, we can also kind of experiment with combining mediums. So, you know, maybe I go back into this with something like a color pencil, and that color pencil is going to go darker than the chalk pastel because her binder is wax. I can do finer lines because this is a finer lined kind of medium that can be sharpened, and that also holds a line, right? So the chalk pastel can give me this like soft, really soft quality. The color pencil can give me this more detailed, kind of harder and darker quality. And you can kind of play with combining those two. And often with art, artists are not confining themselves to just like one medium. They might be doing a whole combination of mediums and using the kind of inherent qualities of those mediums to get vastly different effects. It's especially true in areas like illustration. We don't really see many illustrators just confine themselves to just kind of one medium, but they search out many mediums for various effects. So experiment, see what you like, use this as a testing ground. Here is the final page of color wheels and shaded objects. I hope this expands your knowledge of color mixing and also how various mediums behave.